In this video, we're going to talk about installing R and RStudio. You'll see I already have the R webpage open. It's cran.r-project.org. I'm installing on a Windows machine, so I'm going to use the Download R for Windows button. And I'm installing R for the first time, so I'm going to click Install R for the first time. And you'll see it will provide the newest version of R. The newest version of R is R 4.4.0. This changes pretty often. R is updated frequently, and so you might see a different value here, and that's okay. Just install whatever the newest version is. Now that the download is complete, I will open it. I will allow the changes. I'm going to install in English. You can look through the terms and conditions. I've installed R on a few machines. No one's come for my house or my salary, so I think we're okay. Click Next. I'm going to use all of the defaults here for installation. The one thing I'm going to do is tell it not to create a desktop shortcut, and I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And what's happening here is it's installing all of R's files. R will allow us to do statistical analyses, create graphs, and these are all the things that are being installed at the moment, all of the documentation, help files, things like that. And so R is now installed, so we'll click Finish. Okay. The next thing we're going to install is something called RStudio. RStudio is a program that allows us to have a nice environment for coding in R. And so what we'll see is it sort of creates an organized environment for us to perform statistical analyses. And it's really important to have it. So you'll see the first step is to install R. We just did that. Notice that RStudio requires R 3.6 or higher. We have 4.4, so that is satisfied. And now we're going to go ahead and download RStudio Desktop for Windows. The RStudio webpage will automatically detect your operating system. So unlike the R webpage, it should just give you exactly the version that you need. You don't have to really think about it. Now that the download's finished, I'll go ahead and open it. And I'll say yes here. Again, we're going to use all of the defaults. You can see that it's going through and installing RStudio, which has lots and lots of tools available to us. We'll see a little bit of that once everything's installed. Now that the installation is complete, we'll click Finish, and we'll go and open RStudio. Upon opening RStudio, you'll see that it'll ask me which version of R to use. You'll see that we have one, R 4.4.0, which we just installed. And so we'll go ahead and use that default version, and we'll let RStudio pick that out as it goes. And so now R will load, and we'll see the opening screen. I'm going to go ahead and expand that. I'll allow them to upload crash reports. So this is RStudio. What we'll have you do is open up a new R script. You hit the plus button up here, new R script. And generally what we'll do is we will write our code in RStudio, and we'll want to save it. And so this R script in the upper right-hand corner is a place where we can write code and save it. Oftentimes you'll see me start with a big code block at the top that says some description of what the file is. So this would be my first R script, and I'll put my name at the bottom. Okay. And just to kind of show what R can do, we can use it as a basic calculator. I could do things like 3 plus 4, right? If I want to run 3 plus 4, I can type it into the console here and run it. So the upper left-hand corner is a text editor, a place where we could write and save code. The bottom left is where we run the code. And this is where I get the answer. 3 plus 4 is 7. I can run that by highlighting the code here and hitting Control-Enter or Command-Enter if you're on a Mac. I can also just, as long as the cursor is active there, hit Control-Enter. That will run. I can also click the Run button. Okay. So there's lots of ways to run code. I'll generally use the Command-Enter or Control-Enter if you're on Windows because that's the most convenient. The other things that we can do, sort of showing some of the basics, is I could do x is equal to 5. Okay. And that creates a variable, it creates an object in my environment. The object is called x and has the value of 5. So if I did something like x times 5, I'll get 25 back in the bottom left-hand corner here. So I can use x like the number 5. Okay. So 5 times 5 gives us 25. And these are the sorts of things I can do when it comes to sort of basic algebra. Later, we'll want to work with data. So we might do something like, let me reinvent x as an object that contains random normal data. I'll ask for a sample of size 100 with a mean equal to 0 and a standard deviation equal to 1. So now x is no longer 5. It's a vector of 100 numbers, and we can print them all out. Okay. something we'll find as we do statistical analyses is that having all of the data gives us all of the information, but it's hard to see what's going on just by looking at a giant list of numbers. And so what we'll want to do is create plots. And I'm going to, create an ugly plot now, and we'll do more on how to create publication quality plots. But you can create a histogram as simple as using hist and then passing in the vector of data. And you'll see that that pops up in the lower right-hand corner. And we see a nice histogram. We can see that it's bell-shaped, roughly normal, with a mean of 0. And this really demonstrates how helpful RStudio is. It gives us a place for writing code. So we can write our code here. I can save it. So I can save it as my first R script. Okay. And so now if I wanted to come back to this and edit it or move things around, I could. It has a place for running code. So not only do I write it here, there's a convenient way of computing what I've written. I have a list of what the environment variables are. What variables have I created? What do they look like? We can also see the history. If we click the history tab, you can see I ran 3 + 4 a couple of times. I have some of the comments that I ran in the console here. So if there is a time where I'm sort of doing a calculation on the fly and I decide I want to save it later, right? The nice thing is I can send this to source, and that will put it into my source file. Or I can send it to the console if I want to rerun it. Okay? And so the idea is that history can be helpful, especially if we ended up writing something in the console that we wanted to save. And in the bottom right corner, you can see I have my plot that I've created. So I can see sort of the output of any analyses I do, the plotting, the history, the objects I've created, all in one sitting. Another really important part about the bottom right-hand corner is we have access to some of our files. So if we wanted to upload data sets or things like that, we can just click on it and upload it, and then we can use those data for whatever analyses or plots that we want to do. There's also information about packages we can install. Some of them are installed by default. And there are help files about learning how to code in R. There are manuals for an introduction to R, writing R extensions, all sorts of different things. There's also, you can ask for help for certain functions that we'll use. And so having everything in view all at once is a really helpful tool, which is why we use RStudio to code our R analyses. And so with that, we'll stop here, and we'll pick up in the next video with some information about how to write nice statistical reports using RStudio.